G'day everyone, Tony, Brett, Azlin joining you. Good to have your company today, and of course we are talking all things budget. 2021, it was a pretty big spending budget. There were a lot of really interesting and very practical measures in this budget, and what we're going to be concentrating on today is talking about the practical uses from this budget as opposed to the individual measures themselves. Now the measures were varied, they were pretty vast. You know, Brett, what did you make of the budget overall? Any sort of particular highlight?
Look, it was a spending budget. Whether it is a pre-election budget, there's a lot of stuff, a lot of talk around it having been more of a Labor-like budget where there was more about spending than saving. But was it the budget we need to have? I'm not sure. But look, for me as an advisor, one of the most exciting things was superannuation. In prior budgets, there's been restrictions around superannuation and how much you can get in, and it seems to have expanded and allowed people that perhaps haven't had a full working life of making contributions to super to be able to use things like house sales or just simply inheritances to be able to make contributions to super to help fund their own retirement. So for me, that was pretty compelling and exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. And Azzy, what were your thoughts on it? Any packaged highlights you want to pick up on before we go into the detail?
I think I speak for everyone here. All our internets were cheering with the superannuation announcements because it's like what Brett said. They're relaxing the contribution restrictions and encouraging people to contribute more to super. But then we also saw the simplifying and relaxing of tax residency measures in SMSFs as well as in individuals, which I think are welcome measures as well, and we'll chat about that soon.
Definitely. So today is going to be focused principally on what to do in a practical sense post-budget. We're going to look at some of the things that have come up in terms of measures, and then we're going to be going through in a practical sense about how to actually use some of these. Now, the very important thing, as you know, we're obligated to tell you at the start of any of these things, is that, of course, all things we discuss in these functions are, in fact, general advice only, not specific, not targeted at you. So, of course, do get advice before you go and choose to do anything. All right, so why don't we get to the top of the rules? The big one that T were just talking about there, of course, was superannuation. So we might bring you in first of all, Brett. One of the biggest measures that came through yesterday, of course, was the fact that the work test no longer applies to those under 75. Now, this is previously, and at the present moment actually, for those 65 years of age. Just give us a bit of a rundown. What was your impression here in terms of what people can do to use this particular measure from the government and the budget?
Look, a really good thing for me is that if you were over 67 and no longer working, you couldn't actually get money into superannuation, and there's plenty of reasons why you might want to do that. Principally, it's to actually start a pension or to add to an existing pension. But at that age, if you received an inheritance or if you gave up work in May or June, received payouts, and then the following year you had money lying around in the bank, to put it into super to start a pension wasn't available unless you did something like go and work at Bunnings for 40 hours over a month in that particular year, which may be problematic for Bunnings now because some of the older people may not need to go and work there.
Yeah.
But you needed to actually work around to actually have that as a strategy after age 67 to be able to make contributions to super. That's been relaxed. So if you're 70 years old and you've got a 3-year term deposit that's about to mature, superannuation is actually on the table for the proceeds of that term deposit, which is quite an exciting thing for many clients.
Oh, it really is, Brett. I think, Azlin, it's an opportunity for people, and there's a couple of rules here, or a couple of applications, I should say, of the rules that we can talk about. But what was your take on this one? I mean, it's actually, I think, a really sensible change.
I think it is a very positive change, Tony, but then we do have to keep in mind that there are two distinct rules. So the removal of the work test applies to non-concessional contributions and salary sacrifice. That means for personal concessional contributions, you still need to meet the work test in some shape or form. So that's something that we need to be aware of. If you're looking at making a contribution and claiming a tax deduction of that contribution, you still will need to meet the work test.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, this is a really important one, folks, and it's not always necessarily straightforward superannuation, as we often say. So there are two types of contributions to super. Let's just make it quite simple. It's concessional contribution is a work contribution. It's something that comes out of your pay each week. And what you're saying is that even though some of these rules have changed, it hasn't changed for that particular application. In other words, for you to raise a tax deduction for contributing to super, you're still going to meet the work test.
Absolutely.
All right. Now, the more interesting part in the application and why the three of us getting quite excited, and I'm pretty sure most advisors will, is that there are some very excellent applications, I think, of this particular rule. So Brett was just talking about money outside of super as what are some of the other things people can do with this particular measure?
Yeah, Tony. So one of the big ones is the recontribution strategy, and what that entails is withdrawing out of your super, recontributing it as a non-concessional and after-tax contribution to increase the tax-free component in your super fund. And a really important thing to note is that our NCC caps actually increase from 1 July 2021. So instead of the 100K per annum, we now have 110K per annum.
Okay, so this is a huge one, isn't it? And Brett, just bringing you in on this one, mate. You know, what's your take on it? What should someone be looking at?
Look, it really is beneficial to clients, not so much in their lifetime, but if they were to die and whatever the proceeds are left in superannuation, we can actually muck around with the taxable and non-taxable component, which doesn't mean a lot necessarily to clients, but when the proceeds are received by non-dependents, such as adult children, there's tax to be paid, and there are now strategies that have opened up for us to be able to minimise the amount of tax that would be paid by these adult children upon your death. So, and the other really exciting thing is, as I was talking about, not only has the cap gone up from 100,000 to 110, but previously there was some legislation that was pretty much stalled in Parliament. You couldn't use what was called the bring forward rule, whereas now you can actually, in one foul swoop, make it up to a $330,000 contribution. So it really does open the door for advisors to look at how much taxable money is sitting in people's pensions under age 74, cash money out, put it back into super, recommence the pension, and have a lot of it now tax-free going to the adult children if they were to die the next day.
Brett, that's actually a really good measure, isn't it? The bring forward rule being accessible. Now, as I might just get you back in, the bring forward rule isn't something that most people who don't work with super every day necessarily talk about every day the way we do. What is the bring forward rule? What does that mean for someone?
That's okay, Tony. So what that really means is that instead of contributing up to 110 per annum in non-concessional contributions, you can actually bring forward your NCC cap up to 3 years, contribute the 330K from 1 July 2021, and that locks your contributions, non-concessional contributions cap for the next 3 years. But it's actually a really handy tool if you've got, a lump sum sitting outside super, you want to put that 330K now rather than later down the track.
Okay, so Brett, just bringing you in, Azlin's talked about the money outside of super, which is a non-concessional contribution source there. What about people who've got shares outside of super, so they have a self-managed super fund? Is that an opportunity too?
Look, it is. You could either sell your shares down, get the cash and make a contribution, or there's lots of platforms nowadays where you can actually just do what's called an in-specie transfer, where you don't sell the shares, but you can transfer those shares, those parcel of shares that you hold, into superannuation, and it can be treated as a personal contribution. So there's lots of things now that are going to be part of our toolkits when we're talking with people.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's just, for me, it's a massive opportunity. And folks, again, advisors get very excited as we do about these sorts of measures, particularly because we're quite confident and aware of the strategies that are available. But if I was to summarise it, guys, I think, one, there's an opportunity to reduce death taxes, which Azlin was talking about. Number two, as Azlin was talking about, and Brett, if there's money outside of super now, you have the opportunity, depending on the amount of money you already have into super, so there's quite a few rules to navigate here, but you can potentially get more money into super as well. And then the tertiary part of it, as Brett's just talking about there, is getting other assets into super. Long story short, getting more money into super and provisioning at perhaps a later stage than had previously been possible introduces some significant tax opportunities, structuring opportunities for families looking ahead. So that's something you're going to be hearing plenty more from us about over the next couple of weeks. Now, in terms of other things that came up in this budget, guys, it was a pretty big budget, particularly in other areas. So there was also some sensible measures, and this is one that I absolutely love, this particular strategy. I might bring you back in on this one, Brett, is the downsizer contribution. Now, they have made a small adjustment here, but let's just go back through this particular rule and its application. How does it work?
Yeah, look, I mean, at the moment, if you're 65 years of age and you subsequently decide to sell the family home, there's certain criteria around, how long you'd need to have held that home for and the like, but you could actually put in up to $300,000 per person into superannuation, in addition to that non-concessional contribution amount that we've been talking about in the past. So this is a one-off opportunity that's aside from all other limitations to get money into super. And the big thing announced in the budget was that age is going to be reduced down to 60. And what the government is trying to do here is to free up stock of larger family homes that are being inhabited by a retired or people above 60 that are looking to sell their home, and it's trying to get them perhaps to sell their homes sooner, to be able to free up some of the cash, buy something smaller and top up their superannuation at an earlier age, which opens up an absolute Pandora's box in relation to what people might be able to do in bring forward retirement.
Yeah, definitely. So, Azlin, just thinking about this too, from your perspective, it opens up some significant opportunities, as Brett's talking about. The question I've got, and it might happen to other people, what happens if I've already got a ton of money in my super, if I'm already above what we call the transfer balance cap, total super balance above 1.6?
That's right. Well, that's why I love the downsizer contribution, Tony, because we've got to remember that you can still make a downsizer contribution regardless of your total superannuation balance. You can still make a downsizer contribution regardless of your NCC cap. So even if you've maxed out your non-concessional contributions cap, that doesn't apply when you're making a downsizer contribution. So this is actually a really, really handy tool to get that additional funds into super on top of your 330K NCCs with the bring forward arrangement. So we're potentially looking at 1.26 mil if you time it right into super.
Now, as I just want to keep you on this one, pension minimums, they went back to normal. Now there was this measure, it's changed back again.
Yeah, that's right. So we saw FY 2020 and this financial year, FY 2021, the pension minimum requirements were halved. They will be returning back to normal, so the 4%, 5%, and increasingly, as you get older. From 1 July 2021, so next financial year, your pension minimums do go back to normal. And I think this is a fair measure because on the other end, we have the ability to recontribute back to super. Right, you could take your full pension, put it back into super. You don't need to meet the word test anymore. So I think it's a fair measure.
Yeah, actually, it's a massive strategy opportunity. I get excited about this stuff. Now, all right, as quickly, this is just a nag point, especially for those of you with SMSFs out there. Please take your minimums.
Absolutely, please take your minimum pensions before 30 June. So remember, the minimum requirements are still halved by 50% this year. And for our clients, we will be contacting you in the coming weeks if you have a pension shortfall as part of a pension review or end of financial year. Okay,
terrific. Now, Brett, let's have a quick chat about this thing, the pension loan scheme. This is another one I get excited about. I've talked to you about this one before. Tell us a little bit about this scheme. How does it work and what are the changes this time around?
Yeah, in the past, the pension loan scheme, it's been a slow take-up from when it was announced, and we don't have too many clients that actually take the opportunity. But I suppose, whereas before you had to be on a pension, it's now opened up to self-funded retirees, and really what it does, whether you are a full pensioner, a part pensioner, or a self-funded person, it allows you to take up to 1.5 times the full age pension equivalent. And whereas in the past you could only take it as a fortnightly increase in income, you can now take lump sums. They're now offering lump sums, and there's a whole formula to work out how much you can borrow up to, and there's certain requirements you have to have, like owning your own home and those types of things. But jump onto the Centrelink website and have a look at it, or Google pension loan scheme, or give us a call. It really is a way for people that perhaps have a nicely valued property but very little in superannuation, that want to be able to live on more income than they've currently got. It's a nice, simple way for people to generate additional income or get themselves a lump sum to pay for something else without the costs of having to sell, which you can sell and downsize, but there's an overlay there, and it's just another thing that financial planners can work with clients to actually make sure that they're living the way that they want to live.
Yeah, I think it's a really great measure. It's a scheme that has not had enough publicity in the past, but thankfully a couple of times now in the past few years it's been adjusted, and again, a really practical measure, don't you think? All right, now bringing it back to tax stuff, as middle income tax cuts, what happened there?
It's actually an extension of an existing measure, Tony. So we know it as the low and middle income tax offset. So that's individuals who are earning or have a taxable income of $48,000 to $90,000 have been receiving since FY 2019 a tax offset of $1,080 per individual. So this is actually a welcome extension of an existing measure, because had this been repealed, I suppose, when it was due to end 30 June 2021, we would have seen our low and middle income earners have an increase in their tax payable from 1 July next year.
Fantastic. So it's really an extension of an existing measure, but it's really sort of being baked in now, isn't it, to future expectations?
And it's still a very welcome extension.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, we'll keep on going then. The next thing was another tax one, Azlin. We love this one, don't we?
We love this one because, we've had lots of chats about expats and tax residency when it comes to Australian non-residents who aren't really sure what their residency status is. And that comes down to the complicated rules surrounding Australian tax residency. So this proposal relates to simplifying the residency rules for Australian tax residents, where they're going to get rid of those 3 tests that we know well, and what they're going to put in is a simple bright line test. And that main primary test really is if you are an individual that is physically present in Australia for 183 days or more in the income year, you're an Australian tax resident. That's quite black and white. All right, so we've removed the grey area. If you don't meet that test, then secondary tests will apply, but as I understand the proposals, it's going to be a much simpler process. This is going to simplify our expats or non-tax residents when they're doing their tax planning, and it will actually also lower their compliance costs.
Yeah, definitely. And so this is a grey area, and folks, just to quickly explain the greyness of it that Azlin's talking about, the bright line as it were, at the moment it's not only, are you away for 6 months and that sort of thing, the test is, do you intend to be away for a really long time? And you can imagine how arbitrary that is, because if you go off on an assignment and you're appointed for 9 months and then it turns into 18 or 24, at what point do you decide that you're no longer a tax resident? So there's this arbitrariness, isn't there? So it's actually a good measure because it clarifies that for so many people who are not only travelling for work, but also people who are probably stuck overseas at the moment because of COVID.
Exactly right. Yeah.
So really sensible stuff. Okay. So folks, a huge number of measures that came through in this budget, okay, and we've just touched on a few of them, but as you can tell, a lot of it's really about how you apply the budget measures to your circumstances. But for many of our clients, and many of you are retirees or approaching retirement, the good news is that the budget introduced a set of measures that are extremely practical, applicable to pretty much most of our client base, so that's very exciting for us. Just to sort of recap, we talked about the contribution measures, the ability to put money into super. We also talked about the changes in the downsizer rule. The downsizer rule, the same concept, get more money into super, which of course is a tax-efficient environment for you. We've also touched on some of those other things there too, low and middle income tax offsets and some clarity around the tax residency rule. So plenty of good things that came through there. But Brett, from your standpoint, what is the big thing that you take out of that you think someone can use that would be, if you like, a practical measure?
Look, for me, Tony, one thing that was very well received on Facebook was the blog and the video that we've done in relation to divorce and love again. And it's interesting, in doing some research before writing that piece, it's amazing how many second marriages fail and how many first marriages, like the Gates, are going to divorce in later years. Now, I suppose in relation to that cash out and recontribute, if you were to die at around 70 years of age and you've been retired, you can actually leave your superannuation benefits to your spouse tax-free. Yeah. But if you were divorcing, you no longer have a spouse, and so naturally the beneficiaries would be your adult children at that stage. And if you've got a large amount of taxable component in your pensions, it's a real opportunity, if you find yourself suddenly single and above 67, to actually revisit what you've currently got in place, and there's the potential to do a cash out and a recontribute. And these things still need to pass legislation. So now it's not like you can do this today or tomorrow or necessarily on the 1st of July, but these are all the things that are going through my head. And as I'm sitting down with you guys and then the advisors here, now we're actually looking at how do we apply these things practically, because it's all well and good if you're that way inclined to read this stuff at night and be excited. Most of the clients are not. But for us to actually sit there and work out, right, for our clients, for people that are going to come and see us, what are the things that we need to be thinking about, and how do we apply those things to make sure it's in their best interests?
Yeah, absolutely. And Azlin, there's a lot of do not try this at home warnings attached to some of these things, isn't there? In other words, get advice.
Absolutely. Yeah, please come talk to us. There's a lot of timing issues and just the practical aspects of implementing these strategies. You will most definitely need an accountant and advisor to guide you through the process.
Absolutely. All right. So folks, that is the budget side of things. Now, just a couple of quick updates while all three of us are online. We've got some really exciting news and some changes coming up in our Sydney team and our Sydney office. Now, you're going to see a little bit more on this on the email a bit later today. But in summary, as we're going to be working very closely with some additional team members to our accounting team from a company called Number Group. Just tell us a bit about what's happening there.
That's right, Tony. So we actually have the opportunity to join forces with Number Group, who are specialist business advisors and tax specialists. The founders are Harold Lutfi, which is actually my brother, and Daniel Martinez. So we're really excited to, have these two specialist business advisors join our forces, and I think we have lots of opportunities to help our clients.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And so, folks, that's an augmentation of our existing capability. You're still going to be working with exactly the same team members in exactly the same way as before, just with a couple of subtle additions there, but especially for our clients, particularly around tax and structuring and some of the more advanced alternatives, I suppose, for taxation around trusts and so forth. Harul and Daniel are experts, and we're looking forward to introducing them to you a bit later on. You'll see again in a video that comes up a bit later today in your email feed, you'll see a video with the four of us, I should say, having a bit of a chat. Now, also on the financial planning front in Sydney, Sydney continues to grow, and we're adding in a fellow named Tim Brady. Now, Tim Brady is a very experienced advisor from Brookvale in Sydney. It's a beautiful Northern Beaches area. Been doing what he does now for a good sort of 20 or 30 years. And we're bringing in Tim and his team across to our business over the coming weeks, and you're going to get to meet Tim also on that video that follows up. But Brett, you have known Tim for years and years and years.
Oh, he's a very smart fellow, and he annoys me actually because he's like Benjamin Button. I don't think he's aged at all, so I'm not sure if he's always been old and he's grown into it. But just looking at the bloke, he keeps himself fit, very energetic, as are Harul and Danny, and I just can't spend too much time in the room with these guys because I feel exhausted.
Absolutely. And Tim can surf as well, Brett, which is something that neither of us can do. Probably something we need to learn to do. And Harul and Danny, as you say, got an infectious energy and a real zest
for
what they do. But that really brings the Sydney team back up to a much larger number than we are at the moment. We've been growing recently, but it really sort of pushes our growth strategy along. And on the financial planning side, it'll bring somewhere around about 8 team members here in Sydney, and obviously working remotely for us as well. As you know, Carol works remotely. And Azlin, on the accounting side of things, adds a couple more team members in terms of our immediate team, but sort of expands your team a little bit further afield, doesn't it?
It does. I think I'm looking forward to this lively office.
Absolutely. It's more lively than normal at the moment. It's actually like Pitt Street Mall used to be just before COVID, isn't it, anyway? Very good. The other thing, folks, just to keep you in the loop too, we have done some nice updates and a bit of a refresh to our website. Now, you're going to find up on the website the usual content and articles. You can see the Lions Raw blog, a little bit of a freshening up of some of the profile pages and so forth. And for those of you who are mad keen on markets and portfolios, just given the fractious nature of markets over the past couple of days, I'll just refer you back to that recent blog piece we did only a couple of weeks ago, just talking about what's going on from an investment committee standpoint, what we see going on out there, because in summary, that particular video a few weeks ago talks exactly about the issue that markets face at the moment, which is a recurring theme we're going to see time and again over the next few years, which essentially is markets concerned about inflation. Now, Brett, while we've got you online, mate, any other thoughts from Adelaide? Any insights? How the Crows going? What's going to happen to Port Adelaide? Hopefully not good.
Look, I didn't even know the AFL season had started. Well, it did start, and I've sort of lost a little bit of interest. And unfortunately, in the office, given that I'm a Crows supporter, there's more Power supporters, and I just keep my head down. And I really didn't want to turn up on the Monday after the showdown, but I did. I copped it. But let's see what happens. It's who's going to win the next grand final, the Crows or the Power or Sydney. It's all fun and games. What's actually nice is that it's relatively back to normal here in Adelaide, and we had a full house recently. And so hopefully, if COVID behaves itself, we can still go to the football and appreciate a beer and a pie, and or in my case, try and not have the pie, and look after our weight.
Azzy, any parting thoughts from you just on the accounting side of things?
I think as I mentioned earlier, I'm really excited to expand our growing team and continue to deliver, the same services we have to our clients and then some.
Absolutely. No, it's all part of growth, and there's plenty of it coming through in Sydney at the moment, and also in Adelaide too. So folks, that wraps it up for our budget webinar for the month of May 2021. We're going to see you around soon, and of course be looking forward to catching up in our next review and starting to do the thinking around applying some of those strategies to your circumstances. There's actually a lot of work that's going to come out of this. In the meantime, if you have any questions about anything vis-a-vis your strategy, your portfolio, or just generally how the budget affects you, don't hesitate to reach out. We always love to hear from you and have a bit of a chat about things. In the meantime, keep well, and we'll look forward to seeing you again very, very soon. Bye for now.